Greetings and salutations, and welcome to the Onyx Tavern. This is your host, the Barkeep, bringing you podcast 30 here at the Tavern, presented by HeroTaku.com. Now, folks, believe it or not, I've actually been able to drag Raptor away from Pokemon X. Hey, Raptor.
Hey, Barkeep. It's nice to be out of the house again.
It was lucky for me that he had already defeated the Elite Four, so it was not that difficult to get you back in here, was it?
Yeah, I was getting bored of farming dittos, so I need to get out and do something.
Yes, and something was the podcast for today. And you know, Raptor, I think we have an interesting topic here today. It's a very much what-if kind of story, but it's a what-if from one of the official writers of Power Rangers.
Yes, yes.
So, as the title suggests, we are going to talk about the famed Hexagon Project. Now, for those of you who are not aware, the Hexagon Project was a concept, and let's mention a few things once we get into this. But
it was more than a concept. It was a series pitch.
It was a pitch. Basically, what it is, it was a concept / pitch developed by Amit Bhaumik. That is the same writer who brought us Forever Red and did a lot of episodes in Power Rangers Wild Force. A lot of the better ones, actually. And it was his idea of adapting Hurricaneger for the 11th season of Power Rangers. And this was before the decision was made to move it to New Zealand. I think this was still after Disney had bought Power Rangers, though.
Yes, because Disney bought Power Rangers shortly before Wild Force began shooting.
Exactly. But they were still using, of course, MMPR Productions and so forth. But the point we're getting to is he had this great idea for Hurricaneger adaptation, which, again, became Ninja Storm. But he had called this the Hexagon Project. Now, I'm putting a link in the comments here or the description to his Tumblr page where he outlines the whole thing himself. We're just going to give you guys the broad strokes on this. I would highly recommend reading it. It's a very interesting read. But we're going to go over the broad strokes of what it was going to be and just kind of give you guys our impressions on what we would have thought of something like that. Again, this did not happen. It was really a lot of the early writing, developing stages, but it's just so interesting to go ahead and read because it almost sounds like a fan fiction kind of thing, but it's not because it came from a writer. But basically, here was the idea. The idea was basically that Tommy had started his own organization called the Hexagon Project, in which he reunited all the previous Ranger teams into basically a SHIELD type of organization, or Justice League Unlimited. Specifically, Amit Bhaumik does say in his notes that Tommy was going to be a Nick Fury-esque character, kind of like Zordon with an eye patch is the way I would describe it.
I'm here to tell you about the Rangers Initiative.
In any case, Tommy would be leading this project with several past Rangers and past characters. He mentions in his outline, Joel would have been in there, Ninjor would have been in there. And what it would be is that he would have brought 3 new recruits to be the Hurricanegers, or let's call them the Wind Rangers, because that's what they eventually became, to be the Wind Rangers. And send them on missions, not in just one city, but basically send them on away missions to different planets, dimensions, possibly different cities and all that, to do certain tasks. And the villains they would face would not be kind of like what Deka Ranger did. Deka Ranger had various villains. They'd have a centralized villain throughout the series.
Or, to compare it to a Power Rangers franchise like Operation Overdrive.
Yes, we had different factions. And the idea would be to bring villains like Prince Gasket, Scorpina, and Lokar back to fight against the Rangers. Like, they're stirring up trouble. Like, Gasket's invading Aquitar or something, and they have to send the new guys
in there. Yes,
and the reason he wanted to do that was if it was a mechanical-based monster, because Hurricaneger really had a different variety of monsters, no set pattern to them. So if it was mechanical in nature, it would be a Machine Empire type of villain. So that was his way of kind of writing that in. But later on down the line, instead of fighting villains, as in Hurricaneger, you had the Thunder Rangers show up, which were supposed to be, and his words are, a rogue Power Ranger group, basically.
And it's worth noting that it's not an evil Power Ranger group, but a rogue group, unlike what the Thunder Rangers were.
Because the idea is basically that, and it's really kind of implied, he doesn't state this specifically, but Jason would have led an anti-Ranger organization against the Hexagon Project, with the Red Ranger, or the Crimson Ranger and the Navy Ranger being his new recruits, basically. And the idea would
along with a yellow Thunder Ranger that would have been female.
Yeah, a American-developed Yellow Ranger that he would have lobbied for to get in there because of like 2 females per season, which they were doing up for the first 10 years, basically, but kind of dropped once you got into the Disney era. But basically, Jason would be leading this anti-Hexagon project, saying that Rangers need independence and all this kind of stuff, that you can't be united together, or something like that. And basically would have led to a Power Rangers civil war. And we'll talk more about that here in a little bit. And he goes on to talk about things like the Hurricane Green Ranger would have been the most powerful Ranger of all. Tommy would eventually become like a villain in a way that he's been so corrupted by this, became so powerful, and that, you know, the ultimate battle would come down between the Hexagon Rangers, the non-Hexagon Rangers,
and the Green Ranger.
Yeah, which supposedly was Tommy. I don't think he mentions that in there. But
I think it was stated that Tommy would have been.
Yeah, and again, I just want to point out, we kind of skimmed this to get the cliff notes so we can have a good discussion about this, but the link is there if you guys want to read the full details and all that. Again, it's very interesting on this. And, you know, a couple of things that were just mentioned in there that are interesting is that he wanted to bring the Phantom Ranger back, reveal his identity. Zed Aku would have returned as part of the Rogue Ranger group with Merrick. And then he wanted to do so many other things that are like, the way he described it is he wanted to clean up the Power Rangers universe so that when they did the 12th season,
it would be a fresh start. Also,
exactly.
One more thing that he wanted to do was that he wanted to have a team up with Wild Force.
Yeah.
Which, you know, that idea of Merrick and Zanaki returning sounds like a great lead-in for that.
Exactly. I mean, his Tumblr thing is really just filled with all these great things that could have been. Now, ultimately, it did not happen. And the reasons that did not happen was simply because, one, production was moving to New Zealand. So if you were going to do past Rangers, you know,
it would fly in a lot of people from
exactly LA. Like what they're doing the Legend War, and who knows how Disney could have screwed that up. And then, of course, and then there was the idea that Ninja Storm was supposed to be a new Power Ranger universe, or they wanted to break continuity, which, to Dustin's line about Power Rangers are in comic books, which is total BS. But obviously, production crew want to go a different way.
And yeah, money would have been the largest thing.
Yeah, so let's talk about this in detail. Let's first start from the story. Raptor, in your mind, how do you feel about the concept of the Hexagon Project? Just the Hexagon alone, Tommy uniting past Ranger teams to go out on space missions. What do you think of that?
Well, it's... First of all, it's as you said. I think you said this either before or maybe after we started recording. Sounds like fan fiction.
Yeah.
This is Bhaumik throwing all kinds of things at the wall, just trying to tie everything together, which, granted, is a really cool idea. It sounds like a great idea to unite all of the past teams, and the idea of a unified system of Power Rangers is cool because it has never happened before.
Yeah, and this doesn't sound like really weird, like slash fiction or Power Rangers have crossover with Sonic the Hedgehog or anything weird or stupid like that. It's taking established continuity, characters, and plot lines and tying them all into one. And an interesting aspect of this is he actually states that Forever Red does have indications of this idea.
Yes,
like his thought was Jason was going to be like on the fringe of society, kind of like John Connor in the third Terminator movie, and that would lead into him being like disconnected from society and wanting this kind of like rogue ranger operation kind of thing. Which, if you look at it, he's riding a Harley, he's by himself, there's no mention of what he's doing, so he kind of laid the seeds there for that.
The idea that Tommy had been in contact with all of these past Rangers and teams, an idea that is further cemented by Dino Thunder.
Yes, and of course it could have led in the idea that Forever Red was so successful, the Forever Red mission, that's what led Tommy to coming up with the Hexagon Project and realize that we could do more good united.
Yes.
But again, back to the idea of the Hexagon. So I mean, again, a Ranger organization led by Tommy. I mean, I think it sounds good. I mean, the thing about it is, and this was something also written in his Tumblr page, is that they would also be manned with civilian staff. Now, I understand to run things like the Justice League Unlimited, the Avengers, you have to have that kind of staff. Now, for Power Rangers, I don't know what I would think about that. I know we had that in Lightspeed Rescue, government organization, but it just seems to me that if you're going to bring all the Rangers together, there's this like brotherhood or fraternity to it that you can't really add civilians into the equation, which to me, it just sounds kind of weird on that.
Did he say that the civilians were going to be major characters, or were they just going to be extras
it did,
that you see in the background?
Mention. I think the way it seems to me is like what they did Justice League Unlimited when they rebuilt the Watchtower. They had the civilians run the transporters and the Javelin Bay and all that. I mean, which I didn't like that there either, because I think it's the same concept. I mean, let's take a look at the Avengers movie just real quick. I mean, because, again, that Project Hexagon is basically the Avengers and Justice League concept.
Yes.
It's the same thing. Let's be clear about that. With the Avengers movie all by itself, because I'm not familiar with other Avengers stuff, I'm not really a Marvel guy. Just to let you guys know, I like DC. Raptor, do you like DC or Marvel? I think he likes Marvel with that look he just gave me. Okay. All right, the point I'm getting at with Avengers is that S.H.I.E.L.D. was established. That organization was already there. Yes. And they brought in these people from different walks of life, basically, to fight.
They tracked the individuals over time, kept tabs on them, as in the case of the Hulk.
Now, Justice League Unlimited, as far as the DCAU Bruce Timm's version of it, it was the 7 heroes came together, they united to save the world, they built the organization themselves. But then they eventually brought more people in when they realized it was getting too large for them to handle on their own.
When they realized that, you needed some people to twist the dials.
Exactly. You can't do everything yourself. Now, those are two different examples, and I'm fine with it in Avengers, but I'm not fine within the Justice League, because, again, you have these 7 heroes.
I see what you're getting at. The Justice League was built by the heroes. Meanwhile, S.H.I.E.L.D. was built by the civilians.
Exactly, and it just would seem odd to me that the Power Rangers would involve other people into that, in a way.
Well, to me, I wouldn't mind it because, like I said, you need someone to twist the dials. You need someone to, hit the launch button. You need someone to clean the toilets.
Yeah, because also, with the Project Hexagon, the reason he calls it Hexagon is it's based off the Pentagon.
Yes.
The U.S. Pentagon. And the idea is like 6 sides to it, usually representing most teams had 6 Rangers.
Yes.
Interesting idea there. So if the size of this thing is as massive as he thinks, an actual hexagon building, with hundreds of people in there, then I can understand why he would go ahead and do that. Again, personally, I wouldn't like the idea, but again, this never happened, so we don't know exactly what it would have been. Just looking at some of the other notes right here, okay. So the different villain factions, I think, would have been interesting.
I like that idea.
Yeah, because, I liked it in Operation Overdrive. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was thinking more of what they did in Dick and Ranger. But yeah, the idea that there's no centralized villain, at least to start out with, that these other villains who we haven't seen in years are up to stuff, that would have been interesting to see, because you know me, I'd love to see Scorpina come back.
Yes.
and Lokar. Lokar, I mean, when your Japanese name is Great Satan, you have to do something with this guy.
Yeah. And although it would have took some skillful writing, because the problem with multiple factions is that it makes it difficult. You have to be careful so you can still have a satisfying finale.
Absolutely. Now, of course, their finale would have had nothing to do with the villains. It would have been with each other.
Which makes me guess that maybe the Rangers would have gradually taken them out. Or maybe the villains get more powerful, which is what drives Tommy crazy.
Yeah, or essentially they could be just a non-factor. They're just...
And then maybe Tommy gets the Green Ranger powers, and maybe he just blows them away.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a number of things here. Let's talk about what they were going to do with the Rangers. Okay. So basically, it almost sounds like B-Squad. A couple of recruits come in, they're mentored by Tommy, whatever, they're the best of the best. Who knows? Or they could be screw-ups like the real Wind Rangers and all that. Right place, right time. But Tommy would have been their mentor, sent them on missions, and this almost sounds like Go Buster in that concept, you know, because I can see Tommy sitting at a desk with like an eye patch, like Nick Fury, just calling up the Rangers and sending them on missions and stuff. That's just what I see. I
mean, I imagined it as, well, of course I imagined it like Dino Thunder because Tommy was a mentor.
Yes.
And yeah, that's what I imagine. I imagine him in a situation room. Someone says, you know, Machine Empire attack.
Yeah.
In Silver Hills. That was no.
Well, Silver Hills is where Time Force.
Yeah. See, that's why I'm just spitting out a random city.
Yeah, I mean,
Machine Empire attack. Go.
Yeah, send the Wind Rangers
Go,
here.
save the city.
Send the Alien Rangers to KO 35, whatever. I mean, I think that would be an interesting concept. You know, here's the thing before we go ahead and move on about that is that it seems to me, though, is that you would have a hard time balancing the Rangers from the past characters like Tommy and all that.
Okay,
because
the returning characters. Yes.
Now, here's the thing. This was still an era where Power Rangers was about 40, 50 episodes long still before we got to Nickelodeon, only got 20. It would have been very difficult to balance out Tommy's character growth and the Rangers' character growth and having all these villains and tight continuity without overshadowing our new Rangers, which might be one of the reasons that it might not have worked. And we'll talk about that later, but just, what do you think? Do you think something like that? Because, like, even when we watch Avengers, it's really hard to balance on all 6 characters. I mean, especially when you didn't even introduce them properly. I mean, Hawkeye's proper introduction was in Thor. Well, I mean, his appearance was in Thor, but we didn't get proper introduction to him till Avengers, and we still had to get to know him. We got Loki, we have Thor, we have all these other characters to go ahead and deal with. So I just wonder how difficult a juggling act that would be for the Power Rangers.
I think it would have been a difficult act because, face it, Bhaumik can't write every episode.
Exactly.
So, in the hands of lesser writers who, well, no, I don't want to say less talented writers, but people who are less familiar with everything as he is.
I mean, if this would have gotten pulled off, he would have been the head witer, no doubt.
Of course, he would have had to, otherwise it would have tripped and fell on its own face.
Exactly, it would have gotten off there. But yeah, it's just like, the concern I would have is, again, overshadowing the different characters and all that. And I'd like to know what kind of characters he had in mind for these Rangers. Again, he said new recruits or something. So, again, does that mean, like, the actual Wind Rangers, right place, right time? Or is
I would imagine in this case, it would have been an academy. You know,
sort of like SPD. And I love how we're drawing all these comparisons to later Sentai and later Power Rangers. It almost seems like those ideas eventually came out. Yeah,
eventually the idea of Tommy as the mentor came around. The idea of a large organization that utilizes multiple teams of Power Rangers came with SPD.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the Rogue Power Rangers. And I love that name, the Rogue Power Rangers.
All right, I'm just going to... Before we go any further, I'm going to state something.
Okay.
I do not like the idea of Jason as a fringe of society rogue. I think that sounds like fan fiction wanking. It sounds like they just wanted to make Jason even cooler because, you know what? Jason was more of a straight-lace than Tommy was.
Absolutely.
So...
Now, I agree with you there. However, let me bring up 2 things. one, you gotta have character development with somebody. Because obviously Tommy's turned from the forgetful, shy martial arts guy into, again, Nick Fury. I love using that reference because I just, again, with the eye patch. But
he's turned into a paragon.
Yeah. Basically. But if you're looking at bringing Jason in, Jason has to change somehow. He can't be the same Jason.
He can't be the central leader that he
exactly.
once was.
And if he's going to be the leader of these rogue rangers, it also ties in, and this is also his Tumblr, about the relationship dynamic between Jason and Tommy. Because as we said, we have that struggle between them, whether they realize it or not. And this could have been a great culmination of that. Because look at the battles that Jason and Tommy have had one-on-one. It started with green versus white, or excuse me, green versus red. Okay. Pardon me there. When that epic battle in part 5 where he destroys the power or the Sword of Darkness and all that. Then we don't get really another battle between them until Turbo, where Jason is the evil one and Tommy's the Red Ranger and all that.
And Jason comments on it.
Exactly. And then this would have been, thematically speaking, the third confrontation between them, but on a much larger scale. Because you have good, then bad. Then you flip it, and now we just have two people who are
both are on the side of good,
but just have different ideological differences.
Yes.
And I would have really loved to have seen that because, the thing is, when you say rogue, we're not saying evil. You pointed that out quick. They're not going to be evil rangers. But in this Civil War scenario, Jason would have been for rangers work independently, and Tommy was
for the organization. Yes.
Yeah. I don't know what I feel about that because Rangers uniting is great because that to me seems like a logical thing.
Who doesn't love that moment in the team up when they all do their team morph, everybody gets their morphing sequence, and then you have the multicolored smoke bombs.
And then, of course, with the Mega War coming up, I mean, hell,
Yeah.
But I want to know how they would have written those ideological differences. How does Jason explain, the fact that the universe is so large, we should work individually? I don't know how you would make an argument for each one. And as you had pointed out, again, let's go back to Marvel Comics here. The Hero Registration Act. Now, I played Ultimate
Alliance 2.
Alliance 2, which was basically the Civil War played out in a video game. And the thing about that is both sides were right, both sides were wrong. But the thing is, I don't see how both sides would be right in this situation, in a way.
Basically, in what Ultimate Alliance did, slightly different. In the comics, Iron Man won the Civil War.
Yeah, but that was wasn't that a fan vote or something? Or
No,
that wasn't a fan vote. That was what the writers decided. Okay.
Yeah, in the video game, there's... Nick Fury gets hopped up on nanites.
Yeah.
And so...
Well, yeah. And I'm slightly familiar with how the comic does it, yeah.
So that was the nice old cop-out of the greater enemy.
Yeah.
Which doesn't sound like the case here.
It doesn't seem like that unless the Green Ranger thing was supposed to be like Tommy corrupted. Because it almost seems that way. Because he goes on to say, to point out that the Hexagon has just become too powerful. Now, in this, this was before Justice League Unlimited. This is basically the same ideas Bruce Timm and his team were coming up with when they were doing Justice League Unlimited. Because I don't know if you know this, but what Bruce Timm had basically said in the commentaries, he was thinking about when they brought in the Cadmus arc, that Batman believed in Cadmus. That what was going to happen was you were going to end up with 3 different factions. Cadmus, the Justice League, and a Batman-led organization.
Batman and the Outsiders.
I guess, yes.
Yeah, in the comics, that was a team that Batman led
on and off. But the idea is that Batman and the Justice League would go against each other because Superman would believe you got to have the Justice League, whereas, Batman's like, you guys are too powerful, you need to be put into check, maybe that's why Cadmus is right. And, you have had something there, which sounds just like the Hexagon Project. But let's point out, the reason Bruce Timm and his team decided not to do it is because they could not think of a way of doing it without Batman looking foolish and people still being able to trust Batman after that. Which, if Batman Beyond wasn't in there, they probably could have done that. but it was just so difficult for them to come up with a way.
Actually, it tied well into Batman Beyond because Batman's all withdrawn from everyone, and
I guess, but again, Batman's the main hero. But again, the point of that is they couldn't find a way to make it work. And again, I just question how would you be able to make this work like that?
He says that that the Hexagon becomes too powerful. So it sounds like, yes, Tommy would have came out looking foolish, and that he would have had to have been defeated and, have to say, okay, guys, you are right. I was wrong. I'm sorry.
Is that Tommy Wiseau?
No, I wasn't trying. I was just making fun of. I don't know what I was making fun of. I was making a dumb voice.
Okay. But what were we talking about here?
Yeah,
Tommy looking foolish, yeah.
And that was the goal of the story. Bruce Timm wanted to avoid Batman looking foolish, but it sounds like the goal of Bhaumik here was to have Tommy be unequivocally wrong.
And what I like about that, actually, when we now talk it out, is that it makes Tommy fallible. Because, here's the thing. Tommy is looked at as, he is the greatest Ranger of all time.
He is the paragon.
Yeah, he can't do no wrong. So to put him in a position where he does do wrong, but not necessarily evil things, just misguided for the right purpose, then it makes him more sympathetic, makes him more understandable, and makes him more human. Because the best thing they ever did in Power Rangers, I think, with Tommy, and this is a little known thing, and I've said this in my last podcast, one of my favorite episodes is Mighty Morphin Mutants, and it introduces that Tommy is forgetful. Now, it's really played up in that episode, and sometimes it appears in later episodes. It's really inconsistent. But the best thing they did about that is they showed that Tommy was a normal guy, that he was fallible, he could make mistakes, that he wasn't the badass Green Ranger, even though he was, So I'd like how that would have tied into that somehow. I know being forgetful and overconfident are probably two different things, but the whole idea that he would have been up so high and then brought down to a lower level is very humbling for him, I think.
Yeah, I'm imagining after the battle that he and Jason just go off into the sunset together while the building's decommissioned, and then...
Yeah, and it would have ultimately ended with the Hexagon being decommissioned, the Rangers going off on their own ways, and again, the clean slate for the next season. Before we move on, I do want to bring up this. There was the interesting concept, and we pointed this out about a dark yellow Ranger. Now, he said that again that he was going to lobby for this character. What do you think of the idea? And, just overall, of a American-made female Yellow Ranger that's essentially the bad guy, the rogue, the opposite side. How do you like that concept?
Well, here's the thing. At no point when I was reading this description did I think of the Thunder Rangers as villains.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that they're villains.
Now, as for... I like the idea, The Titanium Ranger worked out well as an American-made creation. I don't like it when it's a team of 5 guys and a girl.
Yeah.
So...
Or in some cases, 8 guys and 2 girls.
Yeah, wait, is that what Q usually? Yeah, okay.
Pretty much, yeah. Or less, yeah.
For a second there, I was thinking about RPM, but RPM was 7, and that was 5 and 2. Whatever.
Yeah. But, the idea that he was thinking outside the box enough to fit in with some of the standards they had, but to create another Ranger. Because, they could have gotten a very interesting female character out of that, I think, to play the roguish. Because he even said that Navy and Crimson were going to not be the straight lace. They were going to be these kind of, I forget how he describes it, but these are rough around the edges types of characters.
Yes.
And that would have been great. Because I tell you this, I am getting tired of the goody two-shoes. We did get that back with Megaforce and Samurai, and I'm just like, dude, can we have something?
Yeah, we have kind of with Megaforce, but that's a discussion for a different day.
Yeah. So, let's look at this as a whole. So, Raptor, let's assume that Disney decided to keep Power Rangers in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Amit Bhaumik was made head writer of the series.
Okay.
And Power Rangers Ninja Storm became Power Rangers Hexagon.
All right.
and he was able to do all the stuff that he said. How would you feel about that season, about the Hexagon season? Do you think that if pulled off successfully, it'd be one of the greatest seasons of Power Rangers history? Would it be something that could be easily fouled up? Or, what would your thoughts be if that had actually happened, or you heard that was going to be like the next season?
I think that it would have been a fan favorite for sure.
Mm-hmm.
However, I'm not sure how it may have fared with younger audiences, because it needs to be accessible to younger audiences.
Yeah.
They're the ones that buy the most toys.
Now, as much as I hate saying this, I agree with you in that part, but there's got to be a place for the older fan. And
this idea is a season for the older fans.
Yeah, this was like 11 years after. Now, here we are 20 years after Power Rangers, and there's a different perspective, because Amit Bhaumik does go on to say that was something that could have only happened at that point in Power Rangers history, because it was dependent on the Sentai, it was dependent on what they had just done with Forever Red, and where the franchise was,
you could have done that with the Abba Ranger footage.
Exactly, and you probably couldn't do it with the Gokai footage, although we can think of interesting ways of doing that. And the thing is, what he's trying to go ahead and say, I think, and I'm not going to put words in his mouth, and again, we can look into this many different ways, but it's a product of the time, and it would have made logical sense for it to come at that time. Because, I don't think we could do a Hexagon Project nowadays, do you?
Well, especially he makes a comment on how how it was specifically modeled after the Pentagon. Well, in recent years, America's military actions have been a little controversial.
Well, also keep in mind that was 2002, and things are still controversial back then.
But that was before the war in Iraq got going.
And, yeah, okay, so I can go ahead and see that, but he would have come up with some other way to do that.
And he also comments that it's been so long that that the new generation of Ranger fans are not directly connected, don't have a direct emotional connection to Wild Force back. I
almost think that would have to be a completely different franchise on its own, like you were talking about in your video about Pokemon Adult Series, a separate series from the main line that appeals to the older generation of fans.
Heck, we got an anime special for that when X and Y came out.
That was the Origins thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
awesome.
Yeah.
It's funny, everyone on the Pokemon Reddit is always bashing on Ash now that they've had Red. Because Red's everything Ash isn't, but regardless.
Okay. Do you think that we could really do something like that? Look at it, we got more Rangers now. It's been 20 years of history. I guess more Rangers would help you pull it off, and you have a bigger wealth to dive in from as far as stories and characters.
That would be more difficult to pull everyone together for. In addition...
Well, I understand production-wise, but let's talk story-wise. Because, again, his idea was for this to be the culmination of 11 years of story. I don't think you could do that.
I would say it may be a bit difficult now, just because we've had stories go in so many different directions.
Yeah, because let's even consider Gokaiger for a second. That was an anniversary series that was meant not to tie any loose ends up. I mean, it did in a few instances, particularly Time Yellow tied up his storyline very well. But the idea was it was this new generation reflecting on the past. I mean, I don't see how you could go ahead and do that now as much as you would want to.
Yeah, I think the only way it could work would be in a Gokaiger-esque way.
Yeah, which probably is what they're going to go ahead and do. But you're not going to see a season where Tommy's in the lead credits and all that. I mean, as much, you could do it if you, say this took place back in time and retconned a couple of things. But, a modern interpretation of this.
Yes.
I hate to say it just doesn't seem like it would go ahead and work. That he is right. It is a product of its time that it would have to be 2002, 2003.
Once you get enough characters involved, that's when it gets too difficult to try and to give everyone their say.
Exactly. And again, it is based on the Hurricane footage, because I don't think we've had seasons since then that would have been appropriate for that.
No,
I mean, Tokyo Ranger sounds like it might go that direction with, again, the rumor is, again, 2 different teams of Rangers. But since Hurricaneger,
twice the teams, twice the toys.
Exactly. And I would have been interested to see what type of toy lines they would have had. Obviously, they had the Hurricaneger toys, but what kind of Hexagon toys would there have been?
I could imagine that they would have had, they would have had the core Rangers. But, I could imagine them having extra toys for the veterans.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, Raptor, we've kind of gone all over the place here. And, I apologize to you guys out there if we just been jumping around, maybe didn't hit the points that you wanted to know directly and all that. But, Raptor, from reading this and talking here today, just tell me what your final thoughts on the Hexagon Project are and, how you feel about that, just overall.
I think it would have been great. I think it was a well thought out idea, and it's a disappointment that it didn't happen, especially considering the villain we got in its place. Mm-hmm. So I would have loved to have seen it.
In retrospect, I definitely agree on that because back at that point, I was still in high school, and I definitely would have loved to have seen that series.
Yeah,
especially coming off the heels of Forever Red, because that was just the primer. That was to get you going. Forever Red was the start of something better.
Yes.
Also looking at what we ultimately got in Ninja Storm. I mean, Ninja Storm is one of my least favorite Power Ranger seasons, although it's Disney, so yeah, that's just how it is. Something like this would have been a lot more interesting, like you said, with the villain, and maybe they would have had different cast and all that, but I definitely would.
But,
this series enters more conflict, more nostalgia, and more reverence for the past than any season since, and anything that Ninja Storm could have accomplished with what it had.
But, I will say, you said no Sentai team since then has had that kind of footage, but, look what SPD did.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, SPD completely went off the mark, but was still good, even comparable to Deca Ranger.
Yes, yes.
But, of course, that's us making up stuff. And I guess you could do that with Ranger factions. Again, that's something I definitely want to go ahead and see, and I've said that multiple times. But this, I think, was the best point in history up to now where this could have happened, and it would have worked.
Yes, yes.
So, I think that's all we're going to go ahead and say about for right now. Maybe if we have more things, we'll come up with something later and all that. But, you guys tell us, what do you think of the Hexagon Project? How did you feel when you heard about it? Or is this the first time you heard about it? And just what do you think? Definitely leave us comments below. But I think we're going to go ahead and sign off. Raptor, any final thoughts? Any final parting words?
Yeah, I don't know. Let me know if there's been fan fiction written on this, because I'd like to read it.
Definitely. Well, I want to thank everybody for listening here today. You guys have yourselves a wonderful evening, and the tavern is now closed.